We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.
Like Vasquez said in Aliens, let's rock. If you're new to the tribe, Rad is across the table, Rich is behind the mix. My name is Yanni Baumeister, and we are Unity Gym, experts at turning driven people into athletes. This episode is brought to you by the Unified Movement System, the online program that balances strength, flexibility, and fitness in an efficient 60-minute workout so you can unleash your inner athlete. Get daily coaching by us, plus our epic gym and home UMS programs, extensive exercise library, private coaching group, and weekly coaching calls. As a valued listener, use the link in the description to get your first month free. Before we get started, big warm welcome as usual. If you're watching on the Unity Gym YouTube channel, remember to smash that like button to support the channel. Remember, the more people that get those likes, the more people that get this content. Subscribe if you like what you see. Also, I'm excited to announce that joining us today, we have Phil White from ADPT Physio.
And if you didn't know, Phil started work in the fitness industry in 2012, first as a remedial massage therapist, and then went on to study exercise and sports science and a doctor of physiotherapy, postgraduate degree. Now he runs ADPT Physio, where they specialize in delivering the athlete rehab experience to everyone. Phil has been a massage therapist to the GWS Giants AFL team, Olympians, Paralympians, and a number of other professional athletes. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Hey mate, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this one because it's the kind of question that, like, when I started learning about anatomy and physiology, or like basics of anatomy during my massage course, like it's questions like this that made me think, I want to know more about the body, because and went into sports science and another 3 years of postgrad physio, because it's like, I don't know, it's just such a fun and interesting question that we've got to talk about here.
Yeah.
And,
so we got Will Brownlee from our UMS Movement Mastermind group has asked, if I can do 6 chin-ups with both my arms, why can't I do 3 with one arm? The real question there is, Will, why can't you, mate? I mean, weak, just weak. Why can't you do 6 chin-ups? But Will actually said to me in person, because Will's a member of our gym as well, and he went on to this question. He said, it's like, if I can do 4 squats at 100 kilos, why can't I do 2 squats at 200 kilos? And wouldn't it be nice if the body worked like that? But it just doesn't. It's just not the way we can produce force.
It's interesting that you talk about the lower extremity, because there is a lot more of a crossover that makes sense in the lower body than there is in the upper body. For instance, you can generally perform better at a single leg squat when compared to a single one arm pull up. Maybe Phil can,
like, so for an example, if your max squat was 100 kilos, you could likely do a one leg squat at 60 kilos, but you couldn't do 120 kilo 2 legs. So there's some interesting sort of differences between the upper and lower limb. And I guess should we just jump straight?
Yeah,
let's
dive straight in.
Brad, do you want to give a bit of context into your one-armed pull-up training and a bit of how that went?
Yeah. You mean my experience with it all? Yeah. So,
well, not necessarily like the bad stuff, but like how you approached it and how you did it, just to kind of show people that this is how you would get to a one-arm pull-up.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely know the journey for a one-arm pull-up. I've done a lot of research into it and worked with some people that can absolutely do one-arm pull-ups themselves. My problem was that when I started the journey, I hadn't done a lot of research into it, and I didn't understand basically the prerequisites, which was the conditioning required before you do the exercises to get there. So the basic rule of thumb with one-arm training is that you work with a bilateral pull-up, so just both arms working together, and then you go to you can go to assisted one-arm pull-ups. You do like you work through to archer pull-ups, which is like an archer pull-up is where you pull with one arm and the other arm stays completely straight on a gymnastics ring. So it gives as much help as it can, but because it's straight, you're relying on that one arm. And of course, you bridge the gap between pull-ups and archer pull-ups using eccentrics. And then from there, you go to assisted one-arm pull-ups, where you're using like a weight on a pulley system, like where you've got a weight going over the bar or over the ring with a little bit of weight on there, and you're holding it with one hand, so that one arm can only do a little bit of weight, and you reduce that weight over time, and then eventually you go to eccentric one-arm pull-ups and then one-arm pull-ups. But the problem that I suffered was that I didn't develop enough strength in my throughout the whole system with just basic pull-ups first. And what I've learned is that a lot of good coaches will say that you really want to have a 1 RM of a pull-up where you're doing 150% of your body weight. So basically 50% of your body weight on a weight belt, and being able to do 1 RM. And I definitely didn't develop that strength first. And so when I went through all of those processes, I developed tendinopathy.
Can I jump in? Is that as far as you want it to go?
Sure.
That? Yeah. You can finish if you want. I just
that's basically it. Is that I because I didn't develop that 1 RM strength first. I didn't have the synergy with all of the scapular stability work. I didn't do enough passive active hanging, so I didn't develop that ability to be able to really use all the scapular stabilizers, shoulder, elbow, wrist, or just that chain, that system. I didn't develop the strength through the system before I went into it.
And I want to put the logical stamp on this because I have the very, very logical. I was a mechanical engineer prior to being a personal trainer. And the thing that the obvious thing that you need to take into consideration here is that the mechanics of the body don't change when you go to you've got body weight. Let's say hypothetically that you're an 80 kilo human, and when you're holding on with both hands, you've got 80 kilos dispersed evenly through two extremities. 2 hands, 2 sets of gripping muscles, 2 forearms, 2 elbows. And then the moment that you remove one of those hands from the bar, you've got that same 80 kilos loading through only one extremity, 1 set of gripping muscles, 1 set of fingers, 1 set of hands, 1 elbow. And so if we remove all of the other variables that go into play there, now you've got which are balance and all that sort of thing. You've got to understand that the grip and the muscles in your forearms and your elbows are taking an extreme amount of load when you're holding on with 2 hands. When you're holding on with 1 hand, you're not only doubling the load through 1 limb, you're also exponentially increasing. There's an exponential increase in load because now the body isn't balanced. Mm-hmm. And so you're not only taking the additional 50% of just general weight through the limb, but you've got to understand that it's like when your head sits neutral. What's that?
Sorry, never mind.
Yeah, when your head sits neutral on the shoulders, it weighs around 5 kilos. When you tilt all the way forward as far as it goes, the load on the cervical spine is increased by about a factor of 6 or 5, I think it is. So there's all these different variables that go into play when your body isn't perfectly aligned. Your body's really, really well designed to function at a high capacity when it's well aligned. Think of standing as opposed to trying to lean forward off your axis. You're now working muscles in a very different way, and you're going to fatigue quite quickly. It's like anyone who's not really flexible, get them to sit down cross-legged for an hour on the ground. I guarantee you can't do it because you're not, you're actually using muscles in a different way than you are standing or lying, and they fatigue. And so when you sort of amplify that concept when you go to a 1-arm pull-up, because now the structures are not only trying to just pull your body up in a well-balanced manner because you're evenly dispersing the load across both sides of your body. Now your body has to fight gravity in a totally different way. You've got to stabilize, you've got to balance, and the way that the muscle motor units are distributed is over they're spread more thin, basically. So that's the obvious mechanical change that occurs.
And if you look at that with what you just described about the upper body versus the lower body, I guess the lower body is pretty used to working unilaterally because every time we step, every step there's load on one leg, but the upper limbs really don't get that exposure.
Yeah, and just structurally, like the hips. So if you think about the hips and the shoulders, they're both ball and socket joints. But there's a big difference in that when you think about the hips, they're really like in a very sturdy object, which is your pelvis, and the weight's kind of going directly down them, and everything's pretty locked in there. Whereas you think about the upper body with your shoulders, the only bone that's attaching the shoulder blade and your arm to the rest of your body is your collarbone. It's acting as sort of a support strap, but it all comes down to muscular control of your scapula, which is going to hold on the socket, and then and then the balance there with the muscles of your arm. And so what kind of the big thing here is leverage. And so basically, as you take away one arm, you've suddenly got the scapular muscles particularly are going to have a much harder job reducing the amount of force they need to hold that sort of steady position, because your leverage is now massively increased. And that's why with the archer pull-ups, you're actually bringing yourself across. You're not trying to go up straight here. You're trying to bring yourself kind of behind behind your that one arm. And with a one arm pull-up, you're trying to get it to be the position where your midline sort of in line with your arm there. Because if you try and stay out in that position without shifting across, then the leverage on your arm is just going to mean that, like, the weight gets exponentially harder to hold. So just imagine if you hold a weight out in front of you versus a weight down by your side, like that's leverage in action. Or if you do a deadlift where the bar comes way off your body versus staying right on your body, that really increases the force dramatically. So that's where the leverage aspect is the biggest one here, and the overload of those muscles that aren't conditioned to support it.
Yeah. It's an interesting one though, isn't it? And Will, it's definitely a good question that when you don't really understand these concepts, you might just be thinking.
Will's a numbers guy. He's a finance guy. Yeah. So I love it. It's a great question from him. If you know him, it's in great context, because he's a literal numbers guy thinker, and it's sort of like, okay, do the math. Like if I can do 10 pull-ups bilaterally, why can't I do 5 unilaterally? Or 10 squats bilaterally, why can't I do 5 unilaterally? And to a numbers logic, it sort of, you kind of go, oh, well, that sort of makes sense, But when you start to think of it from an engineering perspective, the leverage, the change of the fulcrum point, where now you've got to disperse muscle motor units across, the stabilizers are going to work way harder than they have to when you're on a bilateral movement. There's all these different variables in play that essentially thin out, spread the nervous system and the neural drive much thinner, and you've got mechanical disadvantage now working against you, as opposed to mechanical advantage. And
do you see the same things in building and metal framework, Mr. Engineer here? I'm looking at Yanni. Like if you've got a piece of timber that is rated to hold 100 kilograms laterally, if you get 2 pieces of the same timber, can that hold 200 kilograms laterally? Is that how it works?
Formulas, and it depends on the material that you're using. Yeah, absolutely. But this is where engineering becomes a science, because they need to work out load capacity of things, and when you're building huge structures, there was a lot of trial and error and failure, and sometimes they get it wrong, and it comes down to all sorts of things, even the mix of the concrete. They have special people who are just on site to monitor how they mix concrete, so that it is at the exact dose of sand as opposed to the binding agents, so that the structure, and it varies depending on how big the building is, what the concrete mix needs to be, and how thick the concrete,
so before we keep going down this kind of rabbit hole, I think just having an idea of also a power production curve it will help out sort of Will's understanding as well, with that idea of like, if you can do why can't I do double the amount each time? And basically when you have like a peak strength, so your 1 RM, there's this idea of a power production curve where you can pretty well graph what's going to happen to your maximal force production as you do kind of more and more reps. So like it's not the case that you can do double what you that's not how this works. You have like a maximal force, and then as you fatigue, you're going to have this sort of this drop off with there. So that's like, if you want to have a look at that, it's pretty it works with like fitness and with strength, and might be worth looking into, just to give yourself an idea about what you can kind of expect for like normalized values for fatigue. But that's the physiology side of it, is you've got a curve. It's not like it doesn't go in it doesn't halve each time.
Now the last thing we should finish on here,
you can also then train specificity to basically with different types of muscle fibers. So the type 2 X versus A, or type 2B versus A, one is more quickly fatigable, so you will get a steeper curve if you're very much adapted to that. And funnily enough, people who don't exercise much are going to be much more of that type. And then sprinters, or people who do lots of high intensity interval stuff, will be more of the longer fatigable. So you can actually slow down your power production curve drop off by training higher volume, higher intensity stuff. But you can also go the other direction and kind of have a really long tail if you train strength endurance, and that's with cardio and strength endurance, you're basically like stopping that total drop off. You're trying to maintain a curve of being able to produce like and that's using the different types of muscle fibers again with the type 1 muscle fibers.
So where I want to end this conversation from a very practical standpoint, because the risk versus reward profile completely changes when you go to unilateral, really heavy loaded exercises, particularly chin-ups. And Rad certainly suffered ill fate diving into this headfirst without understanding this properly. So I think that's probably where we should end the conversation, because it's the most valuable for people, is that if you want to go to unlocking a one-handed, one-arm chin up or something like a pistol squat, you have to take into consideration that, you know, if you don't put the effort in, if you don't put the work in, if you don't build that solid foundation where you allow, we've spoken on different podcast episodes with Phil, the different rates of adaptation to the tissues to occur. You know, you might have the physical muscle or neural drive strength to be able to get yourself close to it, but your tissues, your ligaments and tendons and bones may not be there just yet. And this is
overload.
Yeah, but I think this is what you guys do so well, is that, like, I love how you have each of your fundamental movements, and then you have a progression and regression for basically at any stage of where you are. And so, like, because a lot of people, when you don't know how to do it, you're like, okay, I think I've just got to keep on doing more and more and more of the same thing. But as Rad pointed out, with the actual like exercise selection, that's where like that bridging the gap of like where you are to where you want to be, like you want to take plenty of steps along there so you can gradually increase. And that's one of the hardest things in calisthenics and bodyweight stuff, is because you can't just add another kilo on the bar. It's all about learning how to use your body weight. And that's where I think you guys do it so well, is like showing all the different stops on the train station you have to take before you get there. You don't just, it's taking each of the steps and not just running headfirst into a wall.
And I can tell anybody that's listening to this, because we have a lot of people that ask us about tendinopathy and golfer's elbow and tennis elbow, and I can say that I am completely symptom free now from the approach that I've taken, and it's like a distant memory for me that I even had those issues. So there is hope for everybody, because I got to a point where it was so bad that I couldn't do any pulling movements at all for about 6 months. My tendinopathy got that bad, and it's just completely gone now. So you can, if you take the right approach, you can really transform your body in a very positive way.
Awesome.
So thanks so much for listening, everyone. If you want to connect with Phil, he can be found on Instagram at ADPT Physio, and you can book in for an in-person or online session with Phil at adpt.physio.
And if you do have a elbow tendinopathy, I went through a bit of a personal experience where I gave it a medial elbow tendinopathy to myself by doing as many pull-ups and wrist flexion exercises as I could do in a week. Got it pretty bad. It was really frustrating, but I mean, it wasn't frustrating because I planned to do it. But yeah, it was good learning experience of just how hard it is to try and fit the rehab in with the regular training. But the thing I really wanted to point out was it's the same exercises that can injure you will also be exactly the same things I did to rehab myself. So flexion and wrist flexion plus pull-ups were the same things that it did to rehab, but it's just a matter of that dosage.
Yeah.
And it is tricky.
We did an entire podcast episode on this recently, so look out for that one.
Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. And if you enjoyed that, check out any of our other Sound of Movement podcast episodes, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And we'll see you for the next episode of the Sound of Movement. Have a great day.